I'm author Mark Muncy,
And I'm author Erika Lance.
and this is Eerie Travels. Greetings, travelers.
Greetings, travelers. That was my enthusiastic greetings, travelers.
That was a good one. That usually means, that signifies something. What does it signify?
What it's going to signify is we have an amazing freaking podcast today. And I didn't say a swear word in the first 8 seconds. That was not a swear word, so it doesn't
Yeah.
count.
Yep, freaking doesn't count.
That freaking doesn't count. Frickin'. No, I'm super excited because our guest today is also somebody I've known for a long time, but it is around hilarity. So I think we should just jump into it. But I think we should jump into it with a moment for something everybody needs to get stuck into their head forever.
Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. They'll eat you, mash you, squish you, mash you, chew you up for lunch, and finish you off for dinner or lunch.
Okay, so welcome to that for everybody. By the way, that's going to get stuck in your head forever. You're welcome.
I have a story about that, but I'll save that for later. So
Okay, so let's welcome our guest, who is the amazing author, Jeff Strand.
oh my gosh.
Hello.
Yes.
Jeff, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Now, we have innumerable topics we could discuss with you because of your vast portfolio of author works, but we want to talk about one of your most recent ones, which, like the movie that it's based on, was seriously the pinnacle of epic cinematic achievement. I can't even say it with a straight face. Which is, you wrote the book on Attack of the Killer Tomatoes.
Yes, I think it's one of the finest literary achievements, maybe not just of this century, but of all centuries.
You know, it's hard to argue that. I mean, you are a Bram Stoker winner. So,
Oh, I'm sure I'll get another Bram Stoker for this one,
Yeah,
unquestionably.
This is lifetime achievement material. So
They're not even going to draw out the suspense. They're just going to give it to me without announcing any other finalists. Just,
who's
all know
gonna,
how
who's
this
gonna
is going.
compete?
Here you go.
Yeah, nobody else could be in this category at this point. Like, you own the category.
Yeah, there's no point in doing the charade. Like, we know how this is going to go.
Screw Bram Stoker. It's just going to turn into the Jeff Strand Award, awarded
There
to
we
Jeff
go.
Strand every year.
Just for this book. We'll just keep doing
Yeah,
it.
just for this
over
book.
and
They're going to say, we can't just give it to him in 2023. This achievement spans beyond 1 year. So
yes. Oh my gosh.
So,
Some
some of our listeners, sorry, Mark, might not actually know what the hell this movie is. So, Jeff, I don't know if you want to explain it or you want us to explain it, but it needs a little explanation.
I feel sad for anyone who hasn't heard of Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. But yeah, it's a 1978 spoof movie. And it's important to note that it is a spoof movie. It's a full-on joke comedy. And a lot of people who haven't actually seen it don't realize that. And they think, oh, it's just the stupidest idea for a movie ever. It's like, no, it is flat out, it's a comedy. The filmmakers are not trying to make a serious movie about killer tomatoes. It's a very, very goofy movie about killer tomatoes.
And it takes a whole level of ridiculousness. And it's similar to, what is it? Killer Clowns from Outer Space. And and they made a sequel to this movie, this Attack of the Killer Tomatoes.
Well, they made
a couple sequels, right?
Yeah, there are 4 of them in total. There's
Yeah.
Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, Return of the Killer Tomatoes, Killer Tomatoes Strike Back, and Killer Tomatoes Eat France. So
Yes.
Wow. It went into 4 whole films. I'm going to put the links to these movies, the IMDb links, in our podcast notes for everybody. Because, if you want to give a day to something that will literally sit in your memory forever, which may or may not be a good thing, you can watch all 4 of these. You can binge them in a row.
and if you want to give more than a day to it, there was also a Saturday morning cartoon.
I was about to say there was a cartoon.
Oh, wow.
And,
this franchise is expansive.
Yeah.
Oh, I had no idea. Okay, so what
And a Game Boy game.
Oh, there's a video game?
There was a Game Boy game.
Oh my gosh, I don't even want to know. Okay. So Jeff, take us to the thought, because you are a prolific writer. You have absolutely work all over the place. Like you do a ton. What made you go, you know what? I want to write a book called Attack of the Killer Tomatoes based
Well,
on
part of
this.
it was just a joke. And, if you do a novelization, generally you are hired to do it. It's before the movie comes out. And so you're working directly off the script, and your job is to do a fairly loyal version. You add backstory, you give a little bit more character development, maybe explain things that got cut out of the movie. But your job is to basically do the book version of the movie. But you're also doing it pretty much, you've written the book before the movie's released, and then all the promo is done when the movie's brand new. But Encyclopocalypse Publications had been doing some retro novelizations.
Yep.
So it was basically the novelization of movies that, classics and some non-classics, from 80s, 90s, whatever, just going back, and they were fairly popular. And so I just, not specifically referencing those, but I just did a joke tweet saying, how is it possible that no one has ever asked me to do a novelization of Attack of the Killer Tomatoes? And then Mark Miller at Encyclopocalypse sent me an email and said, hey, if you're serious, let me see if I can make that happen. Let's do it.
Oh, wow.
I was in a Zoom meeting with the guys who made the original movie. And
Fantastic.
I said, I would make this as goofy as possible. I would treat it like you had Marvel Cinematic Universe money to make the original movie. And literally their only feedback was they wanted it to be as family friendly as the movies, which does not mean squeaky clean, completely kid friendly. It means keep it it was a PG by 1978 standards. It would be a strong PG-13 if it came out today.
Yeah.
Keep it that, don't do some big gore fest, F-bomb laden, filthy version. Do a reasonably family-friendly version. And that was their only comment. And so that's what I did. And they loved it. So
That's fantastic. No,
Well, and I have to say, one of the things, because I've been listening to the audiobook, which by the way, I heavily recommend because your narrator is awesome who's done that. And it's got a lot of sound
Joe
effects.
Hempel.
Yes, got a lot of sound effects and things like that going. So it's pretty amazing. And what I thought was funny is, and I'm not going to give a lot away, I promise, is the narrative you
spoilers
add-
for a 20-year-old movie.
Yeah, well, but the narrative you added to explaining some of the stuff that you would see on the screen, but you can't read in the book. But like in the very beginning, there's somebody who dies from drinking the tomato juice. And I love that you were like, took 20 seconds on the screen, but you're giving a whole backstory and all this stuff to the person who drank the tomato juice and died. And I literally, tears were coming out of my eyes. I was laughing so hard at just the sheer ridiculousness of that, but also the awesomeness, because you could then really visualize what you were talking about versus, Mark went for this and of course watched the movie again. And I was like, I can't put myself through that. But what made you decide to do that sort of take on it when you started putting it together?
Well, that was part of the reason to do the book. There's no reason to just, rehash all the jokes from the movie and just do a literal version. The fact that it's a, movie that came out 45 years ago gives me a lot of freedom. People are not precious about it. People are not like, you didn't, follow the story exactly. It is Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. I didn't just go off in a completely different direction. It is very much a novelization of Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, but I got to add tons of stuff to it. I got to comment on the movie itself a lot. Not everything in 1978 has aged well, so I got to have fun with the cringy parts, from a really old movie. And so a lot of it was just how funny, make this as funny as I possibly can. I didn't want to recycle their jokes. So if the joke is in the movie, it's not in the book unless I use that to springboard to something else. So, there's the line, one of the most famous jokes in the movie is, could you pass the ketchup?
Ketchup.
No, what have I done?
I was going to say,
That's
yeah.
in there, but then it goes to a completely dark, weird place. So I wasn't interested in just, hey, here are the jokes from the movie, but I wrote them in a book. I wanted everything to be, fresh and original, and just use the movie as sort of like the starting point, following it kind of scene by scene until at some point I don't. And then just using it, taking each scene, saying, okay, what can I do to just go completely insane with this? And so from the example you brought up, in the movie, it's just a real quick sight gag. A guy drinks tomato juice, gags, falls dead. It's like, but that, it's like, okay, well, what can I do with that? Well, that would be horrible. Like, the idea is that the tomatoes are alive. So the idea that they are, that you have drank them and they're inside your body is really horrible. So the joke is the narrator of the book saying, look, you can't just skim past this in a 20-second scene. We need to discuss just how horrible of a fate this poor guy had, and why wasn't this through the whole movie, drinking tomato juice? This should have been like the focus, not the people getting eaten by tomatoes. So it's just each scene, watching the movie, say, okay, here's what happened in the movie, what can I do to twist that around, comment on it, go over the top, because I had an unlimited budget, whereas they had a very tight budget, and just try to make something that was a companion piece to the movie instead of just here's a literal retelling of the movie.
And you break the fourth wall quite a bit in the book. And
the movie does too, but not
that was more the sequels.
With the book, I can just take that to an extreme.
Yeah, I think the sequels did that a little more. And I remember Return of the Killer Tomatoes, at one point they joked that they've run out of money in the movie, and how are we going to do this? And they're like, product placement. And up until that point, they'd just been drinking cans that say like beer and stuff like that. And then suddenly everything is, all the named products. And I was like that when I was reading the book, I was like, okay, that reminded me of that bit. So
No, and I thought, so the narrator is the narrator you, or is it a character that you created for it as well?
It's supposed to be, it's not super consistent. So the introduction establishes that this novel was actually written in 1978, and then I killed the guy who had written it and passed it off as my own. But I don't completely stick to that, because it's Attack of the Killer Tomatoes and people aren't looking for real strict adherence to continuity. So it's supposed to kind of be me writing the book, but what I wanted to do was, the joke is that this book was written in 1978, but then there are lots of anachronisms in it. So, the very beginning of the book is present day, 1978.
I loved
it.
I was like, I had to listen to that part again, because present day 1978, and I was like, wait, what? And I rewound it to 30 seconds, and I listened again, and I was like, oh, that's funny.
Right. So yeah, the conceit is that you're reading a long lost 1978 book, but then it breaks that quite a few times for comedic effect. So,
which is perfect, and it nails it. So when you did this joking tweet that ended us all at this story, and I feel like you have a few of these throughout your career where it just seemed like an innocent action that resulted in you getting something cool at the end. Do you like this movie? Did you where was this movie, or did you just pick something that was an obscure movie?
No, I like this movie. I saw it in high school. I loved it. My mom and sister hated it, just loathed it.
Yeah,
completely. It's my sense of humor. So, Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, Airplane, The Naked Gun, all those goofy comedies, that's my thing. And so Attack of the Killer Tomatoes was perfect because it's recognizable. People know Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, but people aren't, they're passionate about it from a standpoint of it being a comedy, but they're not passionate about it from the standpoint of this novel better be, the movie we know and love. You could do pretty much whatever you want, as long as it was funny and kept to the right tone. I had a lot of freedom in what readers would accept. So, if I did, I would do a Evil Dead movie, that would be a lot of fun, but then you'd get the hardcore Evil Dead fans like, oh, you got that wrong. That's not
right.
What's supposed to be. Whereas you're not going to get that with Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, unless I did a really serious book, which was never going to be the plan. So
I don't know how that would have gone if you did a very serious book.
I think it would have gone poorly.
Yeah, no, because
filmmakers, they wanted the tone right, but they didn't care what I did with it beyond that. It's not something where it's like, that's not how that character would behave in that situation.
So
And a lot
how
of
many-
what I did was mess with the way the characters behave in the movie and then give them a backstory that sort of contradicts what we've seen, where, in the movie, there's a really good sight gag that the paratrooper always has his parachute dragging behind him.
Always. Yep.
And it's a funny sight gag. It doesn't work in a book. You can't just say, and then his parachute was always with him, because it's not funny in a novel. So instead it just became, the other characters see that and it's sad. It's PTSD. Like, what was wrong with this poor man that he always has his parachute dragging behind him? So by giving him a really dark way that
Yeah.
people react to him, I sort of took that sight gag and did something that made sense in a book.
What about the how many times did you watch the movie as you were writing this book?
I watched it. It's not a movie that I just watch over and over and over and over, but I'd seen it quite a few times. I had the deluxe DVD set already, so I'd watched it. Then I watched, all the special features and all that. So I watched it once all the way through, just as the memory refresher. And then as I was writing the book, I would watch each scene, and then so I'd say, okay, here's the scene I'm going to write, play the scene, and then sort of play that scene back as many times as I needed to, and then write it from there.
So so not to spoil a 40 some odd year old movie,
I
but
feel like you can spoil anything you want at this point.
yeah, all right. So the tomatoes have a terrible weakness. And it is how we save the day as the United States government. I do love that in the book and in the movie that this isn't one of those like most monster movies where it takes forever for the government to get involved. Literally, I think the second scene is where the military are organizing forces, and a helicopter gets taken down by a kamikaze tomato. It's some pretty impressive stuff. So when writing this, the scale escalates quickly, and you said, as if it had a Marvel budget, where did you escalate? How do you feel like you escalated beyond that?
Well, very early on, there's the tomatoes versus the giant squid scene. The escalation starts immediately. So I wanted to basically give people, once you get past the introduction, the movie starts with the housewife is washing dishes. She looks in the sink, a tomato is rolling around, it bounces up, and she screams. And then we get into the theme song that Erika apparently is not a big fan of.
Mark will sing it for you if you want.
Well,
but
there was a moment in high school where a terrible teacher was torturing us all by just being a terrible teacher. And at one point during the final exam, they gave us a final exam of 4 questions and then told us we had to sit for 2 hours and we were not allowed to say a word or do anything, or we would all flunk the exam. Anybody who mentioned anything would flunk the exam. And after about 20 minutes, I cracked, could not sit in silence. And that's when I decided to sing the Attack of the Killer Tomatoes theme song. This was 1989. And it was a must do. And I literally stood up and did like a Broadway show version of it up and down the aisles. And yeah, I got flunked for that, but I'd already aced the class. So, it was a C average. I was good. But, that song is iconic. And I love
the song.
It just doesn't
printed
leave,
in the
though.
book.
It's not supposed to leave.
Yeah, but
So the concept was so in the movie, it's the tomato springs up and that's the end. And so I had, a multi-page action sequence where she's fighting the tomato and more tomatoes. So I was hoping the reader would pick up, okay, we're just going to take what happened in the movie and go nuts with it.
Yeah.
And then I sort of tried to do that in every scene, just take what's there and then put my own big twist on it and go with the fact that I can do whatever I want because it's a book and words are free.
No,
Good
and
stuff.
I have to say though, you do. I have watched it several times. I did not make myself watch it again. I'm going to say make myself instead of the word force, but I make myself watch it again. But like even your descriptors with the motorcyclists and stuff like that, fucking brilliant. I'm like, it adds so much to this story. But again, you nailed it. You didn't take away from the cheese and everything that went with Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, right? So I thought it was absolutely brilliant. But so as you're going through the process of writing this book, are they seeing chapters or did they just see it at the end? How did this work with the filmmakers? Or
No, I had total creative control and they didn't see it until it was done.
Nice.
I didn't tell the filmmakers this. I told Encyclopocalypse, I said, I'm not gonna, like, if I'm gonna do an Attack of the Killer Tomatoes book, I'm going to do it, on my own schedule, on my own terms. And then if they have comments afterwards, I would happily address it. But it wasn't gonna be something like, all right, what do you think of this chapter? Send your notes and then I'll incorporate your feedback and then I'll send it back. It was, no one saw the book until it was done.
wow. And then they get it and their response was they loved it.
Yep.
Did they have any notes at all?
No, none.
Good.
Oh my
As it
God.
should be.
Completely nailed it. Yeah, I mean, I had the resume to do it. It's not like they're taking this, long shot bet. Oh man, this guy, there's no way he's going to be able to pull this off. If you look at the books I've written, I'm not the weirdest choice for a Attack of the Killer Tomatoes book. I've done.
No, you've got some amazing pedigree there. I liked Gleefully Macabre Tales is one of my favorites to flip through. So and your whole Wolf Hunt series is classic for me. So
Right. So I've done horror comedy for adults, but I'd also, my young adult books, A Bad Day for Voodoo, I have a bad feeling about this. Those are just really, really goofy comedies. So if you read those, you say, oh yeah, this is laying the framework for Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, which goes even more, further than those. But, I have written really, really silly self-referential stuff at novel length. So it wasn't something where they were just taking this chance, like, okay, I don't know if he can do it. It's like, yeah, I've got the skill set to do Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. If
I love
anything
that.
else, I can do Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. Lots of books I couldn't do, but that one, that was in my.
So let's talk about the response. So now you put this book is released. What has the response been like for you?
It's
From
been
fans
great.
and stuff.
It's actually been better than I expected. I assumed I would get, this book is just stupid. And I'm not really, probably because the people who would say that are not buying a book called Attack of the Killer Tomatoes.
Yeah.
So my guess is if you forced everyone to read it, then a lot of people would hate it. But, no one is being forced in school to read the novelization of Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. So you're kind of yet. After it wins the Pulitzer Prize, they might start forcing our nation's youth to read it. But for now, you're not reading it unless you're doing it willingly. And in theory, if you are someone who would willingly pay money for Attack of the Killer Tomatoes and then read it, you're probably going to enjoy the book. It delivers on its promise.
No, totally. And what about have people referenced what the movie meant or how it impacted them versus your book and stuff like that?
It's not meant to stand, you can read it without ever having seen the movie, but it's really meant to be a companion piece. The best way you can read the book is to watch the movie first and then read the book right away. So because there are the jokes about, the bits that don't, hold up in 2023. And so those are much more helpful if you've seen the movie. There's one sight gag in the movie it's a really good joke where the military and government people are trying to discuss what to do, but the room is too small and the table takes up the whole thing. So everyone has to crawl over the table, and it's a really good sight gag and it works really well in the movie. It's not funny in a book, and then the room was too small and they had to crawl over the desk. So the joke for that part was just everyone commenting on how spacious and luxurious the accommodations are. And if you haven't read the book, it's kind of funny, but if you haven't seen the movie, it's mildly amusing. If you have seen the movie, then you get exactly what I'm trying to do, and then it becomes very funny.
Yeah.
So no, it's not meant to exist outside of the movie. It's meant to be because I assumed that people who don't know the movie aren't going to be flocking to buy a novelization of it. And so I'm not getting a lot of, I'd never even heard of Attack of the Killer Tomatoes until this book came out. It's generally, oh yeah, I saw that movie when I was 15 and loved it. And so I really love the book from that perspective.
I'm kind of curious now if anybody has noticed the downloading or however you can get Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. I didn't even look that up because I know Mark watched it on a damn DVD that he has because
I own the physical copy. Yeah,
Yes,
sorry, special edition.
I know,
my
we
steel
all
book.
know, Mark, that you own all the physical copies of the most obscure movies in the entire world. We're aware. But
I actually have
I've
the
had-
Elvira 12 Nights of Fright DVD version, so where she hosted it, and she had some great jokes about it as well. So, but no, so you got to meet the original filmmakers for this, and at least virtually and all
Zoom,
that.
yes.
Yeah, via Zoom. And so did you have any questions for them or anything before even starting?
No, not really. I knew what I wanted to do, and I didn't want to bug them.
Nah.
So it wasn't something where it's like, my God, just write the book, leave us alone.
Yeah.
So I sort of did it all off by myself. In the world of the internet, I didn't have to, I had, the movie itself at my disposal. There was an online transcript that I could use to follow along with also while I was following with the movie. And there wasn't a lot of stuff where I needed to, well, what was this character's motivation? Because I was sort of changing all that. So
I was
I
curious
kept them
if you
quite a
if
bit
you
after the book
decided,
was done, but not during the writing of it.
did you incorporate anything from the sequels into the?
No, I purposely didn't.
Okay.
Because at one point I thought I would. I was like, I'm gonna bring in all the different franchise.
Oh, it was the
together.
John Aston's mad scientist from Return of the
I was
Killer.
thinking about
Tomatoes.
doing all that, and I thought, no, I'm going to keep it specifically the first movie because I'm not going to step on the toes if someone else wants to tackle it. They asked me, they said, we'll reserve Return of the Killer Tomatoes for you if you want. And I was like, no, I think I have sort of laid it all out there. It's like left everything on the field with this first book. Also, I think the second movie is where it starts to get quite a bit more clever. You've got the bit
it
where
gets
they
very
stop,
self-referential too.
right? They have to stop the movie to do the product placement. There's a bit where the extras come on, like, hey, you can't speak because then we have to pay you. So I think this, it's got George Clooney, who's actually really good in it.
Yeah, it's like one of his first roles. It's crazy.
He has nothing to be embarrassed about. He does a really good job in it.
Oh yeah, he owns it.
So it's like the second movie I think is the best of the franchise, and it's a genuinely really solid comedy. It's like, okay, well, how do I do that? Do what I did with the first movie to the second movie? Because the first movie, a lot of the jokes come from, it was a cheaply made movie, and they use that to their advantage, but it's still a cheap looking movie, except for the accidental helicopter crash, which was real.
Yeah, which actually happened.
I thought, I don't think I can bring as much to Return of the Killer Tomatoes. Also, I've done Attack of the Killer. What am I going to do that's different? If I went all in on the self-referential and all that, then it's like, well, it's not. I didn't think I could deliver. Lightning wasn't going to strike twice. So, if someone else wants to do Return of the Killer Tomatoes, I'll not stand in their way. But I didn't want to mess with someone who did want to do Return of the Killer Tomatoes and say, well, he actually lifted big chunks of that for the first book. So, I purposely kept it all with the 1978 one.
Well,
Nice.
I have to say, by the way, for our lovely travel listeners, because the travel part of this episode is going to be back to the couch, as I like to do with ice cream or popcorns in a way, but it's free on Amazon because I was looking to see where we could say
it's on
free on
Freevee,
Amazon and
yeah.
Tubi in a couple places. But what's really funny is it has a 4.5-star rating.
Yeah.
On
Oh,
Amazon.
if you're watching Killer Tomatoes, you're watching it for a reason. So yeah.
It's very true. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. I'm going to use actual words.
Okay.
And we'll be right back with Strand.
Erie, Appalachia,
Gear up for a frightful jaunt into the darkest reaches of the ancient Appalachians. Folks deep within the Appalachian hollers lean close to the campfire to share stories of the inexplicable with hushed awe. Monsters rumbling in the hills, strange lights darting through the pitch black night sky, horrible occurrences almost ineffable in their bizarre tragedy. Tall tales, you might say. Tell that to the Flatwoods monster in Braxton County, West Virginia, or the Goat Man of Louisville. Look into his humanoid eyes and let him know you don't believe. And what of those apparitions in Mammoth Cave's Corpse Rock, or the Satan spawn known as the Jersey Devil? How do you respond when confronted by these mysteries? From the metaphysical energy that swirls near Serpent Mound in Ohio to Point Pleasant's Mothman legacy, Mark Muncy and Carrie Schultz explore the dark history lurking in the shadows of Appalachia. Read by Mark Muncy, author and experts on strange folklore with appearances on shows such as Ancient Aliens, The Curse of Robert the Doll, and many, many more.
Greetings, mortals and others. I'm Dick Terhune, the voice from hell. I work with haunted attractions all over the US, Canada, and Europe to increase audiences and enhance their experience with highly effective commercials, narrations, animatronic character voices, whatever your dark heart desires. Let me help you do more, scare more, profit more. Find out more at Voice from Hell on Facebook and at voicefromhell.com.
Okay, we're back, and now we're going to talk about your other stuff. Jeff, you have so many other books. For anybody who hasn't started reading you, do that immediately. We've included your links here because you've written on so many different, I don't want to say so many different genres, although we do know you have one romance book. You have written on so many different sort of characters, including wolves and stuff like that. So, Mark, do you want to talk about the wolves since that's one of your favorites?
Well, I'm a big fan. Honestly, my favorite is the Andrew Mayhem thrillers. With was it Grave Robbers Wanted?
Yep, Grave Robbers
And,
Wanted, No Experience Necessary.
Yeah, that was just amazing. Your horror comedies are solid stuff. Right up there with Evil Dead. I'd put Tremors is like one of my favorite go-to series, and it's got that feel to it, and I love that. So now I was gonna say, so the Wolf Hunt trilogy. Let's talk about that. What makes your wolves different than the classic werewolves?
The wolves in Wolf Hunt can change like whenever they want, so they don't follow the full moon. They can change just anytime they feel like it, and he can change part of his body. So if he only wants to have a wolf arm, he can do that. And that basically, when I was coming up with the idea for the series, or really the first book, it wasn't intended to be a series, it was just going to be a werewolf book. I thought, well, what would make it different is if the guy in human form was also a psychopathic serial killer. So he's not the typical werewolf mythos is the innocent guy who's out of control and he can't, he's a good guy, but he's been bitten. And on the nights of the full moon, he does horrible things that he has to reconcile with later. So I thought, okay, what if it was a werewolf who was as horrible as a human as he is as a werewolf? And then I thought, well, what if he could, had total control of it to the point where he could change his arm? And that's how he gets out, because in the beginning of the book, he is locked in a cage. They've captured him. He's going to be delivered to this mob boss. And our heroes, George and Lou, are told, don't go near the cage. Don't go near the cage. But he gets on their nerves and like, well, we'll just stay out of arm reach. But if he can turn his human arm into a werewolf arm, it gives him a few extra inches, and then he uses that to grab the guy by the throat and get out. So yeah, the two things that make him different are, at least in the first book, Ivan the werewolf is a psychopath as a human and has complete control over his werewolf transformations.
And with the Ivan and everything, I immediately went to Janos Skorzeny from Kolchak, the Night Stalker was what went to my head with that. I was like, oh yeah, and they used him in the Fox TV series Werewolf. So I was like, oh yeah, so it's along those lines. So that I thought I liked that you really went into the mythos and the mythology of it and everything. So, and it kept it real, which is good. And that's why I like the Andrew Mayhem stuff. They're fun, and if anybody, highly recommend them for your reads, gang. So,
you.
travelers, get out there, get those.
My favorite Jeff Strand novel is called Blister. Have you read that one, Mark?
I have not.
So I'm going to give my representation of it, and then Jeff's going to completely correct it to what it's supposed to be. But it is about and it's set in the 80s. Yes, okay, he's nodding, so I'm not, but it's about this girl who's basically kind of disfigured and stuff like that. And it's a whole interaction with somebody who basically kind of falls in love with her, for lack of a better way. Jeff,
Yep.
you might want to jump in so I don't completely butcher the storytelling.
No, that's it exactly. It is a guy, he's a very successful cartoonist in the 80s, which is part of why I said in the 80s, because that's when you could have a successful newspaper cartoonist who, makes a really good living at it. But there's an issue in his life, and his agent sends him off to this cabin to sort of chill out, wait it out while everything blows over. And he gets bored, goes to a local bar, and sort of has a little bit too much to drink, and is hanging out with these jackasses who are like, hey, we're going to show you Blister, and like, what's Blister? We'll show you, you'll never believe it. So they sort of drunkenly go and they find this little shed, like, look in there, that's Blister. And he looks and he sees this horribly disfigured girl. And she appears at the window. They're like, whoa, what the hell is that? And then she lets out kind of a sob, and then he goes back to sleep it off. And then when he wakes up the next morning, he's like, you know what, that was horrible. That wasn't cool at all. She's disfigured, but I shouldn't be peeking in at someone on that. So he basically takes a couple of his comic collections and drops them on, just says, look, I apologize, that was very uncool. I just wanted to say I'm sorry about that. And then it goes from there. So it's a horror novel, it's a suspense novel, it's a mystery, but there is the love story element. So Blister is the good guy.
Yeah, I love the love story element. And anyway, I'm not going to give away a lot of it, but that one is my favorite. So of the Jeff Strands. But you have books that have been turned into movies, correct?
I have stuff that has been like in development. Like, it's a very long, slow, insane process. So I have lots of stuff that's in development, but as far as actual movies that you can rent, I've just got some short films that I wrote. One was made, but it hasn't been released, and it's kind of unreleasable because they ran out of money at the end. So it was
product placement.
Yeah,
Product placement. Oh my God.
had various issues. I don't think it's ever going to come out, but no, I've got stuff ranging from really tiny budget to big studio productions. I got my WGA membership based on writing the screenplay for one of those. So it will be a big studio major thing if it comes out. But the development process on movies is just excruciatingly, maddeningly slow. So which is why I just keep writing books. Like, if I write a book, I have total control. I am in charge of when that book gets done. And with a movie, there are a million moving parts, and it can fall apart for reasons that are completely out of your control. So my focus is still on the books.
So do you do any research on folklore or monsters or anything like that? Or is it all, created from the writer's brain, and just with, general assimilated knowledge? How do you do it?
It is general assimilated knowledge. So it's like, for something like Blister, I didn't do research on small town legends. That's just information that was already in my head because I'm interested in that sort of thing. So it's like, there are a lot of books I've done. If I write a zombie book, I don't have to go out and do research. That information is there.
So for Clowns versus Spiders, you didn't look up the the cave spiders of New York or anything like that then. So
Clowns versus Spiders was an exception because it came from an article I read about how and this was an article around the time a few years ago when there were all the scary clown sightings. It was all over the news. Yep. So you had all these scary clown sightings, then you had Pennywise because Chapter 1 had been, the most successful horror movie in history, and real life clowns were losing their livelihood. So it's like, you're if you were making a living going to children's birthday parties as a clown, you couldn't get that job anymore. Kids didn't want clowns anywhere near their birthday parties. And you had clowns like, we're not mean. We're not scary. We bring joy to children. All we want to do is make balloon animals, make kids laugh, do tricks, and we can't do that anymore. This has ruined our careers. So I thought that's an interesting twist, because in horror books or movies, the clowns are always the scary bad guys. So I thought, well, what if these are good clowns who have lost their livelihood because of all this stuff? But then, of course, because they lose their job in the circus, their only option, if they don't want to starve to death, is to be scary clowns at a haunted house. And so they, like, this goes against everything we stand for, but we have to eat.
Yeah.
So they, reluctantly, as good clowns, pretending to be bad clowns, take the job, and then the spider attack happens on that town, and then lots of insanity.
I like Jaunty. Jaunty was a great character. So no, well, I ran a haunted house for 20 years, and the one year we did clowns, we got protested by clowns. They came across the street and lined up and were holding up signs, clowns aren't scary. And I think more people were terrified in line.
Yeah, I would be
looking
scared
at them
of
than going
holding
into
up
the
signs
haunt
saying
with the
clowns aren't
scary.
scary. So they didn't do themselves any favors.
No, I actually went to them the next day and said, hey, could you guys come back? That was amazing. We couldn't ask for better. I felt kind of bad, but because I trained with clowns a couple times, that's how I learned some of my magic tricks. But it is what it is. But and now we raise spiders, so we sat on the side of the spiders. So
Yeah, no, Mark and his wife Carrie basically just filled their house as a house of horrors for some people. But when you release Clown versus Spiders, I sent that to a friend of mine who has both of those phobias, and the response I got from sending your book to her was "fuck off." That was the response I got from that. She read it, loved it.
The reason I picked spiders was that double phobia thing, because I originally was going to be clowns versus kaiju. Well, wait a minute, what if it was like a primal fear versus a primal fear? People are scared of clowns, people are scared of spiders. Which one do you root for? So
yeah, no, that was absolutely, I sent it to her. That was the response I got. I felt like I had won, and then right after that, I actually, because of that, found a picture of a clown spider, which is the thing that I know is a thing, and then sent her that. And needless to say, she's still my friend, which is actually surprising now that I'm saying this out loud, and she listens to this podcast. So you know who you are, and I love you. There you go. Wait till Jeff writes something else, and I'm like, ooh, this scares the crap out of here. Here's your book. So what are you? So let's go to your awards. You won the Bram Stoker Award, which took a little bit of time because you kept being nominated, right? You were nominated.
Yeah, I had a long, proud losing streak, but not a record-breaking losing streak, but a pretty solid one.
Oh wow! Who holds the record?
Was at least 5, right? I know of at least a few.
I won on the 5th one, but Scott Edelman has been nominated 8 times without a win. So.
Didn't you guys come up with like cards or something?
Scott is the one who created the cards. Anyone who has been nominated for a Bram Stoker Award but not won can ask Scott for this punch card. And so if every time you lose, you get another punch in your card, and he's got 8 punches, so he holds the record. But I had to void mine because before I could get my 5th punch, I won. So
well, that's a really good. So you won. What were you prepared at all when you won? After you go up for a certain amount of awards, same awards, did you have your little speech or everything prepared, or were you just like, nah, I'm not going to worry about it?
My initial thought was, no, I'm not going to worry about it, because I thought I have maybe a 5% chance of winning. I knew what book I was very, very confident would win, and it wasn't mine. So it's like, it's not going to be my year. That's totally fine. I'm still going to have fun. And then I had sort of this panic moment right before the like, if I at least need to have a list of names so that I don't go up there and leave somebody out. So I sort of very hastily scrawled down a list of names, and then thought, that'll just protect me in case I go up and leave off someone really important. And then I won, thought, oh, you know what? I could have had a legendary, inspiring, funny speech, but instead I just sort of went up there like blah, 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 and just babbled my way through whatever it was, and thought, okay, that was a mistake, but I had not expected to win. So
that had to be fun. And I do they film this at all? Because I would love to see the look on your face when they actually said your name. Because I think when you're
no,
not
they
expecting,
film it, but they don't film so it's not like the Oscars where you get reaction shots. So it is my poor speech is, you know, available on YouTube, but it's the camera was focused on the stage, so it's me going up and whatever I said, I don't completely remember what it was, but
did your amazing life Lynn take a picture or do a reaction shot? Because see, that would have been just classic.
yes, I don't think there's a picture of me seeing that I won, but there's a picture of me immediately afterward holding the trophy with a goofy expression. So
that's the moment where they say it and you're like, oh, that was actually my name. Let me get out of this seat.
So as a fan of horror films and the horror genre, and the clown prince of horror that you have been dubbed, what is your favorite monster? You know, what would be your favorite?
my favorite actually is scary clowns. I don't want to be redundant, but if I had to pick one, I would say scary clowns. Other than that, it's kind of straight. I don't necessarily have a favorite monster because I focus a lot more on the movie. So a lot of my favorite horror movies are werewolf movies, you know, like American Werewolf in London, one of my all-time favorites. I love Ginger Snaps. I love Dog Soldiers. But if you say, okay, so are werewolves your favorite monster? It's like, no, not really. But there are some werewolf movies that I just really, really love.
Oh.
And so I have to go with scary clowns. But it really, I don't have a super strong preference. It's more the individual movie itself.
So I have to ask, because we just did a show on, what vampire is the strongest, because I had a realization and it's literally pissed off most of our audience, which is fine. It's fine. I'll just, because it's Twilight vampires. Anyway, moving on. And so we did what werewolves are the strongest. And unfortunately, we came to the assessment that it's the werewolves in the Howling 2, because they can only be killed with
Titanium.
Titanium.
They're immune to silver.
Yeah.
So,
and so you literally have to have titanium to kill them, of which none of us have titanium laying around in like, what are you going to stab them with your earring or bludgeon them to death with your wedding ring if it happens to be titanium? What do you think of the Howling 2 werewolves?
It has been so long since I've seen Howling 2, and I can tell you exactly when it was because they the local station, I think there were 4 of them at the time, so they did a marathon, and so I watched all of the movies at once, and I'd only seen the first one, so that was my first and only time seeing Howling 2, 3, and 4. So that would have been 1995. So I can tell you exactly.
And edited for television versions.
Oh yeah, it was the hardcore editing. So at the end where Sybil Danning is like taking off her shirt and they just show it over and over and over. She was wearing something under her shirt in this cut of the movie. But they still show it over and over and over.
CGI, I can only imagine how they did that. They probably had somebody pencil it in over the frame.
No, I think they just shot an alternate cut of it.
Oh, okay.
I think she did one with the nudity, one without, and then the TV version was without. But it's an odd choice to keep throwing open her shirt when there's, you know, just another shirt underneath it. But
that was common.
So I could not tell you anything about Howling 2 except for that moment, because it's been so long since I saw it, and it was part of a 4-movie marathon.
The only moment I remember anyway too. So
I don't even know how many Howling movies there are past that. I saw the first one multiple times, and then the next 3 as part of that marathon. Then I have no idea what.
Yeah, I think there are a total of 5. I'm going to look it up again because
I thought it was like 8. We found out it was crazy.
I would have thought it would have been way more than 5.
Yeah.
I think sorry. No, there are 7.
7.
No, 8. You're right.
Yeah,
it's 8.
Yeah, it's 8. I thought we found that out last time. So
yeah.
all right. So if somebody is wanting the quintessential Strand novel, what would you suggest for them?
Well, I'm gonna not use examples that we've already mentioned.
Okay, those are good.
I'm gonna say Allison. And
Ah.
Allison's one of my more recent books, and it is about a 45-year-old lady who, it's sort of the equivalent of if Carrie White from Stephen King's Carrie had lived through that ordeal and is living basically as a hermit in her middle age. And so she has telekinetic powers where she can't control, that involve accidentally breaking people's bones. So after a very traumatic experience as a kid, where she, there's a home invasion which she stops, but in the process kills her parents. And because she can't control this, she figures her only choice is to live way off the grid. And her only companionship is she adopts very, very old pets at the end of their life. So if something goes wrong, it's, she's not killing a puppy. If something goes very wrong, well, at least she gave this dog a good life before the end. And so that's how she's been living. And then stuff happens, and of course it goes crazy because it's a novel and not a nonfiction piece.
Nice.
So I'm going to go with Allison.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Well, I
It's
haven't
got
read,
all the
so that's on
humor,
my
it's got
list
the
now.
gore, it's got the action. I think it's pretty much, if you're like, okay, well, what is his work all about? And I'm kind of all over the place, but I think that's a good central location to start.
On my list now.
What about the it should be on everybody's list. What about your favorite horror book to movie? Like, which one do you, or top three, whatever, that you think is fantastic?
I still, and this goes back to the 80s, I still think maybe the 90s, Misery is the best adaptation. I think it's because it's one of my all-time favorite Stephen King books, but I think the movie is even better than the book. I think just the choices they made. So in the book, she chops his arm, she chops his foot off and cauterizes it with a blowtorch. And that, you can't do that in a movie. So they think, okay, so they're going to tone it down. It's not going to be as effective. What they did to tone it down, the sledgehammer turns out is twice as disturbing. And it had to have been a decision saying, this is a big budget Rob Reiner studio film. We can't have her chopping off some guy's foot. So how can we do it without the blood? Let's do a sledgehammer. But the sledgehammer is infinitely more disturbing. It's just, the change really, really works well. And the audience, I saw it opening night with a sold out crowd, and they just went berserk in that moment. Nice. So I think Misery is still all these years later, to me, my favorite of the book to movie adaptations.
No, totally. And I think the cast of that particular one as well,
right,
kind of unbelievable. It was like
every character
perfect.
Every character, meaning the two main characters and one other, they're all dead on. So
yeah, agreed. Mark?
No, my last question for me is I saw on your on your Wikipedia, refreshing my memory on everything, that you went to Bowling Green up near Canton, and I wanted to ask if you had any recollections of going to fun places near Canton, because we do Small Town Monsters Festival up there every year now that they've started that. That's where they, it's Bigfoot, UFOs, ghosts, all that fun stuff. We went to Ravens Rock on the way up there, which is a great, just crazy natural area with caves and all that. I was just curious if you had any memories from there that kind of shaped that horror comedy aspect, because that's where I got most of mine from Ohio living too. So
no, I didn't have a car, so I was basically trapped in the borders of Bowling Green. So I went to a lot of movies, and I constantly went to the used bookstore. So I had I was reading horror novels constantly, watching horror movies constantly, but I wasn't really traveling outside of Bowling Green. So I'd never, I'd been through Canton, but I didn't get to do any stuff in Canton. It was kind of just
nothing wrong with the theater or the bookstore. So
very true. Okay, Jeff, shameless self-promotion time, my friend. where do people find how do people find your stuff? We're putting your website in the link. Is that the best place?
The website's the best place. You know, if you go in on Amazon, type in my name and it'll bring up the whole series of stuff. So yeah, jeffstrand.com is the place to start.
Very cool. And what are you working on right now?
Right now, I'm in the very rare moment where I haven't started a new book yet because I finished a book yesterday. So
and when are you allowed to share about that?
I am. It won't be out until next April. I'm doing some middle grade horror novels, and it's a series, but they're all standalone. So it's not there's no continuity in the series. It's sort of the equivalent to Goosebumps, where each book is its own thing. And so the first one is called Watches in the Dark, and that will be out in that one will be out in August of next year, 2024. And the one I just finished, Nightmare in the Backyard, will be out in August of, I think I'm messing up the dates. The first one is April 2024. The second one is August 2024. I just delivered the second one yesterday. So today has been like catching up on all the small things that I have let slide as I was in that last minute before the deadline panic.
Of course. Very cool. Very cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us here on our Eerie Travels podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So guys, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, tell your friends, get all of Jeff's books, or if you don't get all of them, you will find ones that you're going to absolutely love, because if you're listening to this podcast, he writes stuff very similar to what we talk about all the time. So find the ones you love. We'd love to hear from you guys on the ones that you find what you like. And of course, you can always demand Jeff come back on the show, because
Anytime.
I'm quite sure he would acquiesce. So very cool. Mark, I'll let you take us away, my friend.
Well, I will just say they're crawling up the walls and they're marching down the halls. They'll eat you, smash you, chew you, mash you, all the fun stuff. But anyway, travelers, we'll see you on the other side.